to Funny Mental Lives, a fun and interesting conversation about mental health and recovery. I am here with my friend Mike Veny.
Hello, Sonja, and hello to your viewers out there.
So I just wanted to find out a little bit about what life was like earlier on for you when you were going through your OCDs and anything else.
Sure. Well, when I first discovered I had mental health issues, I was a kid, and I didn't understand what it was. Neither did my parents. And a lot of times when you don't understand what's going on, you basically act out in negative ways. And that's where a lot of the negative stereotypes about mental illness come through. So for me, I would act out with fighting aggressively, acting out violently at home. I would be a person who self-harmed and was just mean to people sometimes. And I would also isolate and be by myself until I realized what was going on here.
It's interesting because I realize that a lot of times when something different happens, something that we don't understand, it's quite normal to react in a kind of a negative way. I don't think it's just exclusively for people with mental health issues. I think it's just pretty normal. So, it's good to know that, though. I think once people get more educated and understand that it's actually not an unusual reaction, that it can lessen the reaction, if you feel like you're not alone, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, I've learned that people don't like to be confused. We as humans don't like confusion. So when we don't understand something, whatever it is, we do everything we can to desperately put it into a box.
Right. So what are the other things that you discovered about yourself when you were younger and, going through all these things? Were there other elements to it other than OCD and...
Well, absolutely. Depression was one of them. That's a big one. That's probably the most common thing that people experience with a mental health issue. And it made it difficult to get out of bed sometimes, difficult to do things. And it actually gives me physical pain, sometimes my depression. But what I learned, from that was that, yes, it has its bad moments where it makes it so difficult on my life, but at the same time, it's really helped me as a musician, because being a musician, you have to be in touch with your emotions.
Right.
And some of my best music has ever been made when I was at my worst.
Yeah, but I think that it's interesting you said about feeling depression as a physical thing. I think that's a lot of what helped me learn to understand where it started, because once you can feel things physically, it makes it easier to identify.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that was really helpful.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think depression is, you're just sad.
Yeah.
Cheer up. It's not that. It's so much more. And it's funny, because even lately, I've been my self-esteem is pretty high. So I can feel good about myself, but at the same time, feel this depression under me at the same time. And that's a brand new revelation of the past 2 weeks that I've really started to embrace, that I can have high self-esteem, feel good about myself, and at the same time have this undertow of depression.
Wow. I haven't had depression for quite a long time because of my time with it and it going on since childhood into my 30s. I have vowed never, ever to go through it again because it's not fun. And honestly, I got quite bored being depressed because you don't do anything. I was always lying in bed, not being able to move.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that actually helped me move was because depression, I would feel out of control. I'm not able to control what's going on in my head, that it's something else is doing it, the depression's doing it or whatever, which in hindsight honestly sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
But one of the things I realized is, when I'm lying in bed depressed, my leg gets itchy and I'll scratch it. And then I started to think, hang on a second, my brain is sending a message to my leg to feel itchy and then sending a message to my hand to move, to scratch my leg. So I actually have got some control over myself, and it's very small. It's kind of like stopping to smell the roses. We forget about the simple things and that we actually do control them.
Absolutely.
They don't just happen on their own. We just are so used to doing it that we pay no attention to it, So it was really important that I started really understanding these little tiny moments that I actually am controlling myself. And it gave me a little bit of power over myself, and I was able to sort of start to build from there. I mean, it's not the only thing. I did a lot of things along the way, but that was one of the very first things that really helped.
Well, no, I love what you said about that and control. I mean, when your depression is high, it can really feel out of control. And I love that you said that, because when you start to get the control, what I found for me is that I actually start to feel better. One thing that I love doing when I'm depressed is I force myself to hang out with people. You know, I force myself to, and I've got friends that can tell you, you know, I say, hey, you want to sit in the park with me? Want to get pizza with me? You want to get coffee with me? In fact, that's how we met, right? We got coffee in Bryant Park. That was so much fun. And, you know, I think it's important to force yourself sometimes into healthy situations.
Well, I think for me, it's also to do with forward movement.
Yes.
Like just hanging out with someone feels like a forward movement, and I think that's really important. I actually, because I wasn't very good at that, at hanging out with people. I wasn't very social because I came from an abusive environment, and I learned to be afraid of people, and my social skills were not very good. Once someone was even remotely friendly to me, I'd jump on them. Wow. And I'd hold on for dear life, and they'd be like, whoa, and then turn and run, and off they'd go, and I'd never see them again. And I wouldn't know how to kind of hold that back, because I would just get either very excited or kind of the desperation to not let them run away from me, and I'd do the very thing that would cause people to run away. And I learned that as a child, and I didn't develop anything beyond that for a long time, because that child, that frightened child, that desperate for attention and need for a companionship child, didn't grow up until I was in my 30s, and so it's taken a long time. I eased myself back into it. I started watching stand-up comedy on YouTube to learn to like lighten up and laugh a little bit, because I was so heavy and weighted, you know, and I needed to learn to lighten up about things. So I started with that, and then I found on Facebook, I searched mental health, you know, and found groups of people who also have mental health conditions and are more understanding, and I joined a group of a girl who happened to live in Queens, and we've since become friends. And I started by commenting on other people's posts, because I thought if I post something and no one responds to my post, that's going to feel bad, and I'm going to be setting myself up for a fall. So instead I started commenting on other people's posts, so that when I commented, when I wrote a post, they would comment on mine. I wanted to succeed. I didn't want to fail, you know, I wanted to actually succeed. And it provided a safety barrier for me, you know, when I didn't have to physically leave my room, my comfortable space, but I was still able to do some sort of socializing. And it's actually been the most effective way of rejoining society that I've done so far. So I love that. Yeah, and here I am now. Like, this is huge for me. It's great. Yeah. So I want to also find out a little bit about what you did to kind of get moving forward in your life.
Well, I love what you just said about socializing, and mental health issues and people issues go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other, you know, and I always say, when someone's really having a bad mental health issue, count the number of real friends they have, and the number is usually very low. One thing that I have had to do, like you, is I'm actually an introvert, although I might seem...
Me too.
Oh, we can be friends. Yeah. And I know how to play the extrovert game really well, though.
Yeah, well, you have to.
Well, you have to, and I've really learned to, again, be intentional about asking people to make an appointment with me, getting an actual appointment on the calendar, and it's been just amazing. And, you know, I had to go through a lot of times where I feared rejection, with someone saying, no, why would I want to hang out with you? But for a while, I remember one summer I did this, where I set a goal. Each week I would make 3 coffee appointments with 3 new people. Didn't matter who they were, just 3 coffee appointments, 20 minutes. We get to sit down for coffee. I would ask people on the block, you know, the old scary lady that nobody wanted to mess with. I asked her, and she actually said yes. And the important thing was to get into the habit of socializing. And it brings me to something else, is phones, cell phones. Yes. Those things that we had to turn off before we recorded. We're so into those things that we are losing our ability to socialize with other people.
I have an interesting observation about that. I don't know if this is a general truth about everybody, but so once upon a time I felt like I was the only uncomfortable, awkward person in a social environment. Now I look around at different people socializing and see them like this on their phones, and I think, I bet you $1 million there's a good chance that you feel awkward and uncomfortable and you have a better relationship with your phone than you do with the people you're socializing with. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like a bunch of uncomfortable people. What are you doing for work?
I am a mental health speaker. I get to speak about my issues to people.
Yay! And they stay in the room and don't run. That's awesome.
They don't usually run. They sometimes give me some funny looks, but they don't run.
That's a wonderful job to have. I also do public speaking for mental health, and that's one of the things I love to say to people is I get a room full of people who don't run away.
Yes. It's becoming a more normal conversation to have, and it's still uncomfortable for people, but it's becoming more normal. I mean, the fact that you and I are sitting here in the park just talking about this, we wouldn't have been doing this in the early 80s, probably even as adults, right. So I think it's pretty amazing that we've come this far.
I agree. It wasn't even a thing when I was a kid. It didn't exist. I had to wait till I grew up before I took myself to a psychiatrist to then get a diagnosis of, I was diagnosed with depression, but because I've learned about how my brain works. Like when I was a kid, I was very isolated because I didn't have any friends, and I, as I said, I grew up in an abusive home, and I was also bullied at school, so I found myself hiding a lot. And I would think that there was something wrong with me, that I'm the problem, I'm doing something wrong. And so I would try to go over and over and over again about what I thought, what I said, what I did, how other kids behaved, how my family behaved, and try to come up with a new strategy on how to approach everyone in a way that won't get me attacked, but it didn't really work very well as a kid because I've got a kid brain trying to understand what's happening to me, It's not easy. Even adults can't necessarily process violence, It's not easy. And so when I got older, I learned how to kind of, as my recovery, I learned how to retrace my mind and how I thought, my patterns, my thought processes, my behavior. And I learned to understand it from as early back as I could. And it was really that's been the most important thing, is to be able to understand how I function. And instead of relying on, I think that's one of the benefits of being so isolated, was I learned to rely on just myself. Yeah. And so that's really helped me as an adult. My thing is to make things that weren't working out so good when I was younger, making them work for me instead of against me.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do something, right? You got to be your best advocate. You're number one. Woo.
I love that you said that, and I think a lot of times people you and I were talking about this recently, rely on a system, or rely on a professional, or rely on unhealthy things to get through their issues. And at the end of the day, even if whether or not you go to therapy or not, getting to that point where you realize that it's up to you to steer your own ship is very liberating, and that's what I'm getting from you, is that it sounded very liberating. So I think that's really wonderful, and I'm in the process of doing the same thing.
So when I decided to take on my recovery on my own, I was a foot messenger at the time, so I could use my time to think about what I needed to think about, important things, because being a foot messenger, once I learned the subway system, I didn't need to think much more beyond that. It was a very easy job. So I chose to use it to think about my recovery and try to understand what was going on, because I had a major PTSD episode in 2013 in a very public place. Probably was a public display of humiliation, but part of my PTSD is that I black out, so I don't actually know what happened. I just know that afterwards all the people that were there didn't want to talk to me anymore, so that's kind of how it went. But I decided that I got to do something now, or I might not get another chance. So I used my time as a foot messenger to really learn and understand. And so I decided to take it on as though I was going to be competing in the Olympics. I figure, we put all this time and effort into hobbies and careers and sports and all this sort of stuff. Why wouldn't I do that for myself and my mental health? Because without that, I got nothing, Right. So I acted like I was training for a major event because, I mean, I'm not going to be in the Olympics and show up on the day and expect to be good. I'm going to train my ass off.
Yeah.
So I trained my ass off to try to work out and understand what was happening in my head and what caused me to lead up to this PTSD episode. And that was exhausting, man.
Wow.
That was hard work, a lot of brutal honesty, not much fun, a lot of crying. But in the end, very much worth it. So, yeah. So, yeah.
I'm so learning so much from you just sitting here, and I know we're doing this for the viewers out there, but I am learning so much, so thank you. And, you know, you taking on that attitude of like you're training for the Olympics. A lot of times when people struggle with mental health issues, it's like an extra thing on the side. They're focused on their jobs, like you said. They're focused on other things and putting 100% into that, but they don't make that full all-out commitment. And like you, in 2001, I did the same thing. I made this all-out, I was going to get bloody in the process commitment to taking care of myself. You know, I said, if I don't, I'm just going to die. And I think that's really important. And, you know, one thing I'm noticing about the two of us here is that, you know, we both feel good about ourselves, you know? And
it's very empowering. It's really empowering to take that control back, you know?
No, it really, really is. And like you, I'm the same way. And I think it's something I wish more people would learn, is that idea that you have to make a full all-out commitment.
It's something that you really have to commit to. It's a full-time job, you know. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You can't half-ass it, you know. You got to you got to charge at it.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a process.
It's a slow journey.
A very slow journey. But a lot of times people try to deal with mental health issues as if it's like a cold. I want to go to a doctor, get the symptoms taken care of, it's done, I want to just move on with my life. And many people end up medicating themselves and just thinking everything's good because their symptoms are down. But the beautiful thing about the way you and I have gone about recovery in our own way is that we're still digging at the layers.
It's going to be for the rest of our lives, I think.
To the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people to remember that you have to see it as an ongoing process, and it's a beautiful process when it starts to happen. But I think that's great. Can I actually ask you a question?
Sure.
In your self-discovery, what is the coolest thing that you've learned about yourself?
My sense of humor.
Okay.
It really is. Like, so when I first started training myself to laugh by watching stand-up comedy, I actually started to feel little bits of joy within my body, and I thought that was so strange, because it felt like a strange feeling, and I was like, why is this a strange feeling? I've laughed many times throughout my life, but I'd never felt joy. I'd gone through the motions of laughter, but never actually felt it in my body, and I didn't know that because I just thought what I was doing was the way it was supposed to be. You know, until I suddenly felt it, and I was like, oh, this is what it's really supposed to feel like. Oh, this is interesting. And once I did that, I learned to like myself so much more and just be more understanding and accepting of myself, because it's easier. When you can laugh at yourself, it is so much easier to accept everything that goes along with just who you are. You know, I walk around with my foot permanently in my mouth, you know. I'm constantly saying things that offend people, and I used to get really upset. Not that I enjoy offending people, but I don't get hard on myself about it. I've learned to laugh about it and make it funny, and then that person goes from being offended to now laughing with me. So fun. It's not the answer to everything, as none of this is. You know, these are all just little things that you could do to help, you know, change things. One of the most important things too that I learned was that I didn't have to think like a whole different person. I just had to take the way I already thought and just like tweak it a little bit, look at it from a different perspective. And one of them is a big one was that, so abuse has a lot of power it had a lot of power over me, and it controlled most of my life. And I'd become that little frightened child when I think about it. And then one day I decided to look at it a little differently, and I thought, how would I be as an adult if the answer to my problems was to beat children? And I thought, well, if that was me doing it, I would have no respect for myself. Like, I would think I was an idiot. Like, really. I was weak. so that sort of stuff. And I just thinking of it that way, it wasn't so that I could go to my dad or whatever and say, you're a weak, like I didn't want to do it to attack him. I did it entirely so that I could see it differently, and it took away a lot of the power, because I realized that I was not the weak one, because that's what abuse does. It makes you feel like you're the weak one. But in actual fact, a person in and of themselves, if their decision is to beat children to help them somehow, that is a weakness.
And that's one of the reasons I talk about my mental health and speak about it, is because it gives it less power. And I think that's really important, because these issues can take over you where you feel like you're completely out of control, and yeah, it's a horrible feeling, and that contributes to a lot of the suicides and all that. So I think it's important to not give it power, and I love that you do that.
Yeah, communication with yourself and with other people is very important.
Something we were talking about before, people have trouble identifying their emotions. Like, as far as we've come in this society, we are horrendous when it comes to identifying what we are feeling.
Expressing them.
Yeah, in a healthy way. So I think learning to get better at communication skills for everyone is a good thing for mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, we're taught that if you express your emotions, that's a weakness.
Yeah.
You're supposed to keep them in and deal with them and be strong. But that does not feel strong, because that can go horribly wrong.
It can.
But learning to express it clearly, because people think you're just going to have a meltdown and go, but you can actually express your emotions quite clearly and eloquently, and get across your message and feel good about it afterwards.
So I don't need to scream at people or curse at people. Okay.
No, you do not. Or attack them in any way, shape, or form. You could just be very eloquent, and it's good to be able to think and understand and be able to recognize your own emotions, and that helps you a lot in being able to communicate clearly. Once you've learned how to do that, it becomes quite easy after a while, and becomes natural. Once things become natural, once you do them a bunch of times, I took 2 years of solid hard work to stop my brain from going in the direction I didn't want to go to.
What you're talking about is a thing called self-talk, and there's a book I always recommend to people by Dr. Shad Helmstetter, which is called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it's one of the books that really started the whole self-talk affirmation movement. And one of the exercises that I do each day, typically in the shower, because I shower most days, so yeah, I try to do it. I try to do it. Hopefully today, yeah, I think I did. But one of the things he says is that, it's important to check in with yourself and have a conversation, simply asking yourself how you are feeling. And a lot of times we don't do that. And a lot of times I will do that and simply pause and listen to what I have to say inside. And there is a whole serious dialogue going on inside that people aren't aware of sometimes. But once you do, what I've also found is that it helps with friendships. Okay. You become better at dealing with other people, communicating with other people, and just being a better friend to people.
Well, they say those of us who speak out loud, well, I know for myself, I do that in order to clarify my thoughts, to make them clearer, rather than, because they always say, people who talk to themselves are crazy. There is that element. But for a lot of us, it's about clarifying what's going on in our head so we can better understand and communicate. And I do it. And one of the things I learned to do was, I really enjoy talking to myself, especially when I'm on my own usually. But even in public places, I've learned to put headphones on my head, plug them into my phone, and talk away. People would just think I'm on my phone.
Can I share something about that? When I started talking to myself as part of my recovery, I was doing it at a time before people were using Bluetooth devices and had the earbuds like we have. So I'd be in my car, driving, saying affirmations out loud, and at that time people would just look at me like, what the heck is going on? So I was very fortunate when people started using speakerphones and Bluetooths more, because no one would look at me funny. But I think it's very important. I do affirmations. Something you might like is I do affirmations in the first, second, and third person. Okay. So let's just say might say I am a good person, I am a good person. Michael, you are a good person. Michael, you are a good person. Michael is a good person. Michael is a good person. To really work on all the different angles of dialogue that it can come from.
I have tried the "you're a good person" stuff, but when I first started out, this was this is how I describe it. It was like taking a garden hose to a bushfire. Okay. It's like not going to do anything. I needed to yell at myself because the negative thoughts were so powerful that to just go, I'm a good person. It was like, this is not going to penetrate anything. So I need to be like, Sonja, seriously, you know.
You had to get military.
Yeah, I did.
And to those of you listening out there, you can reprogram your brain no matter how many years of issues with self-talk, negative self-talk you've had. And the other thing that I've found that you are a testament to is that you can reprogram it pretty quickly. You know, I mean, 2 years might seem like a long time, but, you know, in your whole life, I mean, you've done a lot to really reprogram. So that's something to keep in mind.
So as I got older, I realized that if I can learn to be this way, I can learn to be another way. And the best person to do that for me is me.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know my brain better than anybody else. So, you know, yeah, hard work though, hard work.
Yeah, no, I am right there with you. And self-worth for me has been something that I've gotten better at. And I want to be honest and say, I think, you know, I'm 37 years old, and probably in the past year and a half has my self-esteem really gotten to a very good, healthy level. It took a long time. And there were many years, and I'm sure you felt this way too, where you're doing the brain reprogramming stuff, and it feels like you're hitting a wall. It's like almost like, what's the point of this? But you know you need to keep going, which is the importance of, I love Sonja's thing about training like an athlete. Remember that one. You know, you got to train like an athlete because an athlete doesn't develop overnight. No. You know, it takes many, many years. Yeah. And even then, you still might not get to the level that you want to. So, you know, I know for me, the self-worth has slowly come over time. The other thing that's really helped me is learning to make and keep commitments to myself. Is showing up for myself, I like to call it. So getting up at a certain time, doing something by a certain time, that small act of doing that builds trust with the relationship with yourself, you know, and that's really helped me big time.
So, Mr. Mike,
hi.
I want to hear about what life is like for you today.
Today, life is pretty good. I'm a lot happier. I still struggle with depression every single day. However, I've learned to cope with it in a way where it's not taking over my life. And it's not preventing me from doing work or keeping me in bed like it used to. Although those days do happen on occasion, things are much better. And I've also learned to, in certain ways, like my depression.
Well, you know, if it's there, you know.
It's a great teacher. It teaches me so much about myself. And as we were talking about with awareness, I think that's really important, but life is really good. I do go to therapy, typically once a week when I'm here. I have a wonderful therapist. I am on no pharmaceutical medication. I have a lot of friends that I spend time with, and I'm really just getting better at understanding what's going on when I'm having an issue.
That is awesome. It's really, really important to be able to understand and recognize, and the honesty that goes along with it. You know, you got to kind of do that part.
Well, honesty is scary. Yeah. I mean, when you have to be brutally honest with yourself, that's scary stuff. Good. And my anxiety, get anxiety every single day. I'm always on stage. I'm on camera right now. Guess what? The anxiety's been going all morning. But you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm not running from it. Right. I think the anxiety is a great way to have energy to do well on camera. Hopefully it's coming out well.
It's a really great energy booster. Like, it's going to happen no matter what. You may as well make it into a really good energy.
And something I've done that I don't usually tell people about, that I probably am saying for the first time ever on camera, sometimes, especially before a performance, if I start to experience anxiety, I start doing a thing in my head where I encourage myself to make it worse.
Okay. To prepare for it? Or?
Just so the anxiety will get to a point of no return, and I'll come out with maximum energy on stage.
Right, so you're accelerating it and using it.
And it's been a great tactic that I use for performances, whether that's speaking or being on camera, is to not only allow the anxiety to be there, but encourage it. It's okay. It's not going to hurt me. It's going to do great things for the performance.
That's really good. I mean, it's about acceptance too. You know, this is who you are. This is what you got. You got to work with what you got. You know. So this has been a lot of fun. I hope that you find it interesting and informative and fun. I hope that you guys have as much fun as we did.
Yes, and please leave your comments below. Any questions that you have.
There you go, what he said.